Yes, guys, what is going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Adapt Performance Podcast. We have got a sick episode for you today, and it is on the very taboo and I would say controversial topic of performance-enhancing drugs and steroids. And the reason why I wanted to get Matt on to speak about this topic was it is obviously a very underground, you know, thing. It's just not widely really spoken about, and I wanted him to come on and speak about his experiences in a very unfiltered way, very honest way, because I think the more you try to shy away from certain facts and experiences, the more the truth and actual actionable recommendations and information just gets lost, and it just does a bad job of educating people. And Matt does a fantastic job of this. He's just super honest, which is really nice. So we go through his journey into using performance enhancing drugs. What is it like? So the goods, the bads, the uglies. We talk about side effects, cost, rate of muscle gain versus natural lifters, testosterone replacement treatment, use and abuse, longevity of using them, and elite sport. Okay, so we get into a lot in this episode, and obviously, I'm putting this out there, and you've got to use an element of critical thinking and context. We're not saying that you should take performance enhancing drugs, but we are giving you the information that hopefully just gives you a little bit of a better, well-rounded understanding of things that ultimately affect our physiology as athletes. And I just, I wanted to get somebody on to speak about it because I don't know a lot. And this was a very selfish one for me because I am curious about it. You watch all these documentaries on Netflix and you hear about the Lance Armstrongs of the world, and you watch pro bodybuilding and you watch all these sports, but actually we'd never really get the opportunity to sit down and pick somebody's brains on it. So really, really good episode. And I'm going to say it. There is some really colourful language in this one and some really colourful analogies that may offend a few people. So if you are easily offended by swear words and that type of thing, probably don't listen. And that probably cements the Adapt Performance podcast as the Jeremy Kyle of S&C related podcasts out there, which is an achievement. But yeah, so Matt absolutely smashed this, and I'm super thankful for his time here. So go and check out his Instagram that I do mention in the podcast, because he puts out more information around this. And I do think it is really interesting, even if it's not a thing that you will ever dabble with in your life. I think it's cool just to have an awareness of that. So go follow him. Do me a favor, go share this podcast. Okay, it's in my opinion, I don't know of many S&C related pods that are putting out this type of thing. So go and do that, because I think it's just going to spread that information a little bit better. All right, cool. Sweet. Without further ado, this is me and Matt Tofton. Yes, Matt, how's it going, mate? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, mate. It was a no-brainer. Before we get going, mate, let's do a little bit of an intro. Give the audience a little bit of an idea of who you are, what you do, what you've done in the past.
I'm Matt Tofton. I am an amateur bodybuilder as well as a coach for bodybuilders and sort of general population clients, and also a gym owner. More of your bodybuilding sort of type setup. However, it is probably 95% normal folk.
Yeah, nice. Man, I just want to say, obviously, when I come back to Grimsby, we train there quite a lot with Liam and that. So it's sick, and it's definitely the best gym in that area, and probably one of the best gyms I've been to. I love it. It's you can tell you've put a lot of thought into the equipment, and everything just feels mega. It's one of those. It's like it's all thought out. It's not random.
Yes, it's my baby, so I am very proud. It's not something that I often. Every now and again, I sort of have a little look around and I sort of realize that we have actually created something quite good. I'm always jealous because people walk in and their first impression is always good, but I never got to have that sort of because we built it. We never got to have that first impression. So to me, it's just the gym. But it is nice when people come and are very complimentary of it. But yeah, everything. I mean, we didn't start out we started out with different kit, and obviously as we've gone along, I've been able to reinvest and hand pick things a little better. And you can have a little bit more patience to sit around and wait for the right bits. I'm a big fan of sort of older machines. Some of the new stuff's good as well, which we've got. Um, some of the old stuff's fantastic, and we've sourced bits from all over the world and had to import things. And but yeah, it's a probably an obsession, a labour of love type thing. But yeah, I love it.
Is it this might be a silly question, mate. Do you consider it hard work, or is it kind of at the point now where you're like, you know what, it's set up, I can relax a little bit, or is it one of those where I know a gym owner in Sheffield, and he's very much like he'll wake up in the middle of the night sometimes thinking, "Fuck, have I locked up? Is the gym instructor locked up? Is it going wrong? Is that true? Is that how you are, or are you a little bit different?"
No, I mean, well, we never. It's open 24/7, so we never actually worry about locking up. Um, but I don't know. Like the things that annoy me about the place are things that I mean, I get stressed about the tiniest of things, but I also believe that's what sort of remain. Like we've got a very high standard in there, and the members sort of carry on with that. Weights are 99% of the time put away, and dumbbell like you can't go to many gyms and find a dumbbell rack with 1 to 100 kilogram dumbbells in order all the time.
Hmm.
So everything's sort of kept in order. We have a tight knit sort of group down there. We haven't got thousands of members, so it is a very sort of family type atmosphere. Everyone sort of knows everyone. Um, so yeah, the things that I probably get annoyed about are probably not things to ever really get annoyed about. The way
Mm.
we've set it up 24/7, it sort of looks after itself type thing. So um, obviously we just have to maintain the equipment, the upkeep of things. Things it's a gym. Things are used, things break. That can be annoying, but also just one of those things. It does happen. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, I actually consider myself a terrible businessman, but I'm a brilliant gym owner. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so I'm very good at building a gym and creating a gym and putting things in place. I mean, people get annoyed that we have like a members cap and thing, but for me, the members' experience is far more important than a little bit of extra money from memberships. If the
Hmm.
gym was ever so overrun that people turn up and just like, oh, it's fucking rammed again, and people just as soon as you walk in a gym and it's overly busy and you know you're going to struggle to get your workout done, it puts you in a bad mood before you even get started. And so I never
Hmm.
want that. We don't do things like contracts because I just believe if somebody doesn't want to be there, don't be there. I've seen it before where someone
Yeah.
wants to leave a gym and they're still paying 6 months of a contract, and they're the type of people that then start whispering over people's ears about, oh, and then misery loves company, and it spreads a bad vibe. So if you don't want to be there, don't be there. So we run it in a way that I think it keeps people happy. I'd like to think so.
Hmm.
I like to think people enjoy training there and enjoy it.
Nice, mate. Some good lessons in that in itself, isn't there? And just while we're on the topic, actually, of you being detail orientated, mate, that chair that you've got looks banging. I've got major like chair jealousy with that.
It vibrates, it massages you and everything if you can turn it on. But it's just a gaming chair off Amazon. I got it when I got during the lockdown. I think I got very obsessive with Call of Duty, so I
Yeah,
ended up with some crazy setup, and then that just petered out very fast. But
mate,
yeah, I've
that's a
still got my
fucking
chair.
throne.
It's
Yeah, keep the
nice,
chair, mate. Take that
lovely.
to the grave with you. Um, cool. So, I was thinking this morning, mate. I was like, right, how do I know Tofton? I was trying to do a little bit of a recap, and it took me back to Thorpe Park. I think that's kind of where my first memories of you. So just to share a little bit of information. I used to work in a chippy. I did like a two or 3 year stint in Fish and Chicken, which was a haven park in Cleethorpes. Um, and this weedy little lad, I had fucking hair down to my nose. He's one of those. And you were a doorman. You were working security at the time.
Yeah, 2012 I'd have been. I worked there.
Yeah.
Honestly, that summer was probably the best summer of my life. One off
Yeah.
up until that point,
One
and I
off.
always say if I could go back to a period in time, I'd probably go back to that summer. But yeah, we
Mm.
worked, and then I think sort of I got to know you a little bit through Dave Patterson, who Guerrilla Fight Team, who I believe you're still very sort of involved with, and things like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think I even popped down Dave's gym a few times, and you were there doing your strength and conditioning stuff on the side, and on the non-stop.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's definitely
Yeah.
how I got to know you.
Yeah, and I can remember, one of my first memories actually of like conversations we were having. So I think we'll get into this a little bit, but I can remember you showing me a photo of Lee Priest and his tricep. It's kind of the iconic one. It's one of the ones he's probably known for.
Yeah.
And I looked at it today and I'm like, fuck me, that is an absolute mutant of an arm. Like it's absolutely mad. Um, so what I want to kind of chat through today, mate, and I've kind of give you a little bit of a rundown of where I want to go with this, and the idea being performance enhancing drugs and steroids and gear and all that type of thing. And the reason why I want to get into it is different sports have like a different acceptability of talking about this thing,
Mhm.
so like bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, and a little bit of Brazilian jiu-jitsu are quite open about it if you're in the right circles. But everybody else and pretty much all other aspects of strength and conditioning, it just doesn't get talked about, even though we know it goes on, and I think that lack of education and that lack of openness probably leads to more harm than good in a lot of cases.
Mhm.
So I kind of want to just get into it, and you said you were going to be super honest about it. I've got a few questions that I want to go through, and I think you're just going to give me a good back and forth with it. I don't think you're going to tell everyone to take gear straight away, but I think you are going to probably speak about some of the real benefits of it. So can you give us a little bit of I guess, a rundown? What was your journey into performance enhancing drugs, and were you on them in 2012? Because you were big then. You were fucking big.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the year I did my first competition in 2012, but I started using drugs in 2009, the end of 2009. So I was 20, approaching 21. And I think that was just, I was at university in Lincoln, and the gym that I was in, it was just very much a part of the culture. It was always spoken about. You had a lot of big lads in there. Um, and I think just being around those guys, um, I don't want to say it was inspired to take drugs, but you know what I mean. When you see everything and you see what people are doing and how big people are, and you sort of have aspirations to at some point get to that stage, and you do. Like I was naive, and I was still naive at that point, but your eyes are open a little bit, and you sort of see how sort of rife drug use is. But I'm also someone that does a lot of research into things. Like when I first started, I just used to spend hours and hours on the computer just looking into training methods and the nutritional side of things, and obviously drugs and just and supplements and um, just trying to sort of expand my knowledge as best as possible. And then I think after the first year of university, I came home and I decided to sort of do my first ever diet. Um, and then again, I trained at a gym back home, which is a very sort of bodybuilding orientated. Everybody was taking drugs. Everybody talking about drugs. Um, and I decided that I mean, it was inevitable that I was going to use them at some point. But I said to myself, I'm not going to take them until I get myself in shape. So I dieted. I got myself into really, really good shape naturally. And then when I went back to university that year, I decided I was going to start taking drugs. And I think I started in probably, I think October of 2009. Um,
Hmm.
never really looked back. And then the journey
Okay.
from that point onwards has probably just been a lot of mistakes, a lot of
Hmm.
education, um, to a point now where I feel like I'm quite sort of well versed especially in the bodybuilding side of things. Um, I've spoken to experts in the industry and know the application of things in terms of other sports as well, and their uses. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, that's so 2009 was when, and then I did actually just do sort of like your typical 12-week testosterone, blah blah, then PCT, and then I think from 2012, maybe 2000, late 2011, sort of onwards, I've then just been on since. So it'll be periods of
Hmm.
high drug use and then lower drug use, sort of bridging between courses. So yeah, I've been on drugs for 10, like non-stop for 10 years, 11 years. Um,
Cool. So with just going back to one of the things you just said there, mate. So PCT meaning post cycle treatment.
yeah, post-cycle treatment, post-cycle therapy.
Yeah.
It's basically just taking another load of drugs to try and kickstart, let's say, or bring back your sort of natural production, which will generally going to be suppressed when you use testosterone. Um,
Mm,
it's not something that's actually necessary. Your body will do it, but it might take longer. So
hmm.
you can sort of use other drugs to make that process a little bit faster because having low testosterone isn't fun. Um,
Yeah.
and obviously, the longer you stay on drugs, the more suppressed you're going to be, and the harder it may be for your system, your natural production to sort of restart. But yeah, it's not something that's necessary. A lot of old school bodybuilders would just stop taking drugs, cold turkey, as they say, and then their
Mm,
natural production would start, and then they just do some more drugs. And
yeah. Okay. So I guess moving on to that then, what would you what's it like? I'm just going to kick off with that. Like genuinely, like, is it? I've heard some people say, testosterone's like you feel like a superhero. You're a bit of a man about town. You've got these flowy arms and you can just do anything. And then some people are like, it's all right. So what are some of the good sides of it besides, obviously the increase in muscle mass that you can achieve? Like give us your take on that.
I mean, it's difficult because it's one of I think when you first maybe like sort of related to that, but also not related. I actually personally believe through dealing with people and helping people out with this that if you find someone with low testosterone, whether that's someone unfortunate, there's something wrong, there's a young or an older person that's got low testosterone,
Mm,
I actually think the difference between them using TRT, like a true medical TRT, just to replace and be normal. I actually think the distance
hmm.
between low test to just normal test is more life changing than the difference between producing a good amount of test to then super physiological doses. Now,
Got you.
I may be a little bit off with that because, like I say, I've been doing it a long time, and I do think it's something you get used to. You don't get used you don't get used to the drugs, but I think you get better at handling the drugs. Um, an
Yeah.
analogy I once heard was like you buy, I don't know, you never driven a motorbike and you get 1,000 cc motorbike and you get on it, it's gonna scare the shit out of you and you're like, fuck me, this is fast. But 10 years of riding that bike and it's just like, oh, it probably feels like a moped. It's still the same fast
Yeah.
bike, but you're just very, very good at riding it. So I think the
Hmm.
longer you
Yeah.
use
You'll climatize.
yeah, I think the longer you use drugs, you almost just get that feeling of normal is oh, it's just normal. So
Mm,
yeah, when you're younger, I think you get a definite sort of sense of well-being, um, sex drive. I'm on. I've always sort of said like mentally, I've never really felt drugs as such. That I don't. I speak to some people and the way they act, I think I almost feel like they're sort of putting it on a bit like demand characteristics. Like, oh, if I take drugs, I'm going to feel like this, and then they take them and then they act like. I
mm,
don't.
mm.
I find it very difficult because it could just be individual differences, but sometimes like the whole sort of roid rate, oh, God, because I'm on drugs and I've smashed things up, and I just think, don't know whether they're putting it on or they're just acting like that because they think that's how they're supposed to feel on them, when in fact it's not necessarily true.
Mhm.
But then I do know some people that genuinely tell me that they feel like a psychopath if they take certain drugs. Um, so
Mm.
my own experience is that I don't think it like let's use a drug trembolone for example. It's one of the popular sort of meme drugs, social media type thing. If I use trembolone, I
Bit of trend.
that I almost get happier. I do. The more I take, the better I feel. the happier I feel. But I know some people that literally take it and they can't live, they can't sleep. They take the smallest amount and their head just goes like they turn into a different person. And I
Mm,
do believe that. So I guess it's probably all drugs do a certain thing, but then I think as individuals, we're all going to respond. There's always going to be a slight nuance to how every sort of person responds to that drug. Um,
yeah. I think just on what you said before, mate, around like having lower levels of testosterone, you're taking them out to get you to a healthy amount, within a good range. One of my friends, he was probably that guy, went to the doctors. He was struggling with mental health, had some health conditions, got prescribed some testosterone because he was low, and he said it's like the best thing that he's ever done in his life.
yeah,
It was just completely life changing. And he's sound, he doesn't have any issues. And I know a few lads. From a few jobs ago, and they were into the drugs and everything. They were fine with it. They were probably pretty aggressive as people. Anyway, they had that side to them, and that really did just kind of flip a
mhm.
switch. And yeah, that is interesting. Around, is it a placebo? Is it I need to act how I think I need to? Have you seen Space Jam back in the day?
I mean, I remember it, but if you're going to ask me the details about it, I'm probably
Oh, I'm going into the nitty gritty, mate. It's when Bugs Bunny tells everyone that we've got Michael's secret stuff. We've got this bottle of like Michael Jordan's like potions, and it's
yeah,
water. It's that type of thing. It's like placebo is a genuine real thing, and the brains are just mad, aren't they?
yeah. I
So,
mean, I definitely think
so I
there's,
guess,
I definitely think there's that aggression, but I think when an expert or someone says, "Oh yeah, you're gonna get some aggression," to me, that's aggression in the gym as a powerlifter, as a strongman. You're going to use that. You're going to harness that aggression. You should still be in control of yourself. But I think some people hear the word aggression and think they're going to go beat their wife up and then do.
yeah,
So I don't know
yeah,
whether it's
yeah.
just sort of
Okay,
the connotations of certain words that are surrounding drugs and people just go, "Oh." But again,
yeah.
people say if
It's
you're an
it's
asshole, they'll
interesting.
make you more of an asshole. If you're not, you'll just be,
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like, if I think back to like some of the more, I guess, publicated, like the media perceptions of steroids, I think back to the bad ones. Ultimately, I think back to, and this I might have this wrong, but like Chris
I think
Benoit,
it's going to say that was the
like
name that
the
was
the
in my
wrestler.
head.
Yeah, it's yeah. You go back to, for people who don't know who Chris Benoit was, he was a WWE, it would have been WWF, I reckon, back
Yeah.
then, wrestler, and he basically, I think he shot his family and then shot himself. And I think he was an open steroid user. I think everyone at that point was
I mean, I
was
think
was
every
on it, and it still
WWF
might be a part
star
of the
is,
sport. I don't know.
but then
Yeah,
again,
it's so there's
how
that.
many cases do you see where someone goes and kills their family and they're not on steroids? So like,
Exactly, and how many people are on it that are
yeah,
sound, and I think that is just the nature of media, and it's, anyway, isn't it? It's not, Matt did a great thing today and he takes steroids. It's okay. Matt did a bad thing, he kicked off at a traffic light. It's just the way people are to an extent. So I guess that was one of the things I had written down was around, like the perceptions of roid rage being a what's the word, like a side effect, I guess. Are there any other like downsides that you've experienced from like a drug taking standpoint?
um, when I interestingly when I did my first ever course of testosterone, it was actually after I'd stopped and I was on PCT. I got a really bad outbreak of acne on my back. It wasn't
Mm,
when I was actually on the drugs. It was afterwards. So I can only put that. I mean, that obviously acne is one of the well-known and well-documented sort of side effects of steroid use. But it actually came afterwards. So I think it was just sort of a fluctuation in hormones that actually did that. And then I've never had any sort of spots or acne again. Um,
okay.
so probably one of the,
Do you think that's like down to you getting better with your drugs, or do you think in terms of how you use them, or do you think that was just like a one off and it's just never
yeah, I think,
happened
like I
again?
say, I don't think it was the drugs. I think it was just a dramatic. Obviously, that as testosterone dropped, and then estrogen was probably a lot higher than testosterone because I'd sort of come off of it. I just think it was actually more the fluctuation of hormones as opposed to anything else. I think is there's so many reasons and pathways for acne. It's not like, oh, if you take this, that's
Hmm.
going to happen. But I just think it's purely one of those genetic things. I have pretty good skin. That was a one. I don't really get spots. Um, but
Yeah.
I see some people take. I mean, I see people take no drugs. They just go through puberty and they're full of acne.
Yeah, well, yeah, mate.
So
Mate, I'm thinking about myself here. I'm like, fuck's sake, it's one of them. I've got one now. I've got it hidden by the light. It's like I've got blusher on it.
um,
Um, so so skin hasn't really been an issue for you then. I saw, just for people that are listening, like I would recommend going and following Tofton on Instagram. He does Q&As and stuff, and people are inevitably going to ask him around drug taking and side effects and what to do about this. And one of the questions somebody asked the other day was around gyno, which is it gynomastia, something
gynecomastia,
like
yeah,
that, gynomastia,
yeah. To be honest, that
and that is puffy nips.
yeah, that is something that actually like I am quite sort of susceptible to that and prone. And I do have smallish lumps. Um,
Mm,
nothing, nothing crazy, but yes, it does. Um, that has sort of affected me in the past, but not to like a massive degree that's ever really affected my bodybuilding. Um,
mm.
and I mean, even though this is a choice, I actually shaved it off when I had a full head of hair.
Yeah.
There's no chance it's growing back now. So I would also imagine that um, my use of steroids has contributed to the baldness, but it probably also contributed to the beard, and I'll take that deal. So
Yeah, I'll take that deal as well. Yeah, may look like a Viking. We'll take it. Um, okay, so going into some of the good sides then. Let's like, what's the reason? Is it just pure muscle mass? Is that the thing? Is that why you
I mean,
take
yeah,
them?
that's my reason. Obviously, being a bodybuilder, um, I wanted the most amount of muscle possible. Um,
Hmm.
so that was always sort of my reasons for taking steroids. I guess everyone might have a different reason. Like there'll be certain sports that they don't want any body weight, so there'll be
Mm,
a specific drug. Like your MMA guys are they're at the top of a weight class. They don't want to be adding any weight, so
yeah,
their sort of choice of drugs will be things that don't add body weight. And I think this is one of the misconceptions with possibly the general public, where they look at certain people and say, "Oh no, he can't be on drugs because he's not big." And
mm,
not all drugs add lots of weight. And it's also about sort of your behaviors as
yeah,
well. If you're not training specifically to build muscle, that's not going to happen terribly fast anyway. But you could be getting a lot of
yeah.
the other sort of effects of drugs. You can be stronger at the same body weight. You can be faster. Everything that
Hmm.
most sort of athletes want. Bodybuilding is just a very, very
Hmm.
sort of small demographic of drug users. I mean, the day I learned that, like,
We think about like Lance
yeah, I
Armstrong.
mean, Lance Armstrong was tiny, absolutely tiny, but his drug use was
Mm,
wild. Um, I mean, Tour de
hmm.
France cyclists don't want body weight, but they do
Yeah.
want lots of red blood cells and lots of endurance and lots of power to weight ratio.
Hmm.
Um, so all of it, like every drug works, but every drug sort of has its own individual characteristics, and people a little bit like a shopping list. You go, right, what do I need? Right, I need some of this, some of this, some of this. Right, I'll take that drug, and that drug. What do I not need? Right, I don't want extravagant body weight, so we won't use that. Um,
Hmm.
so sort of drugs sort of across all sports are a sort of on a need or a need to use basis type thing. The drug that they choose to use is one to get the benefits and the things that they don't need. I mean, the day I
Yeah.
learned that chess players take performance enhancing drugs, I was like, right, that just the whole world's on drugs, or the
Yeah,
or
yeah,
the
gotta
sport,
be.
the whole sporting world is on drugs. Um,
That's mad. Yeah, I didn't know that. But I suppose it is one of those things. Like when we think about performance enhancing drugs, I guess it's not always just about physicality in a sense as well. Because if we look back to what was the drug? Not drug, Jack
Mhm.
3D. So back in the day, so that had like elements of performance enhancing drugs in. I remember, you might
I
know
think it
better
was
than me, but was
amphetamine.
that more of like a stimulant? It was fair. Okay, so it was just like your classic kind of ket and everything. And there was another one that I can remember was going around and like Albuterex, but a similar type of thing. I think it was more of like a fat stripping type thing at that
Yeah.
point. Um, so yeah, I guess there's different ones. Cost going into like cost of drugs in general, is it expensive? I'm guessing it depends on how much you actually take, but if we go back to when you first started in your first course, like what we're talking there versus where you're at now.
Um, well, I mean, the thing is, it's quite a weird thing because sort of the better, the better you get at bodybuilding, the more contacts you know. So you end up actually probably paying less. um,
Okay,
like
got you.
anabolic steroids themselves, in my opinion, are relatively cheap. Um, when you
Hmm.
start using things like growth hormone, the cost shoots up pretty fast. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, you're talking like if we just talk like street values and normal, but yeah, anywhere probably from like 20 to 40 pounds for like a 10 ml vial of some, depending on what it is. Some things are a little bit cheaper, some things are more expensive. Um, but yeah, I mean,
And what 10 mil
if I went back,
is that like a week? Is
well,
that a
yeah, if I went
month?
back to sort of my first course, I did 500 milligram of testosterone for 10 or 12 weeks. So in a
Okay.
bottle, I mean, say in a bottle, I mean, normally than that now they're about 300 milligram per mil, but let's go 250 milligram per mil. So that's going to last. So like, I'd need three of them. So you're probably talking what,
Okay.
120 pounds for 3 months of my first, which across 3 months, I don't. I mean, you'll probably spend more on a tub of protein.
Oh, fuck, mate, my protein can piss off. 175, 175 quid without the discount codes. Obviously, they do all that. But bloody 175 quid for 5 kilos. And I think that's COVID that's done that, actually, because that's fucking
Yeah,
ridiculous. I was gutted. I was
yeah. I think it
offended.
was. I think there was something with Brexit because a lot of stuff's actually made in Ireland. So some of the I think it was something to do with COVID. Not COVID, sorry. I think it was something to do with
Mm,
Brexit and the European laws that a lot of whey protein went up in price for certain reasons. Some people have managed to sort of either reduce their margins and keep the price the same, but yeah, some places have just the prices have gone through the roof. Um, but
yeah.
yeah, I mean, most like sort of I don't know whether they're third world countries or but places you can sort of literally walk into a pharmacy and buy it over the counter. Like you'll pay like
Mm,
50p for an amp. So that might be 1 week's worth, 50p.
yeah.
Whereas you go and try and buy a tub of protein
Mm,
and it's probably like 50, 60 pounds. Um,
hmm.
so yeah, personally, I don't, I mean, it depends sort of, like you say, how much you're taking. Um, but yeah, they are relatively inexpensive, all things considered. Like if you just weighed it
Hmm.
up against supplements that promise you the world or anabolics
Yeah.
that will deliver on the promises, you'll
Yeah.
probably pay less for the actual
Hmm.
anabolics.
So that being your first kind of course then for 12 weeks, 120 quid, let's say, getting to like your current stage now, or even beyond this, professional and the real big guys, is it a case of to get bigger they're taking more and more? Obviously, the training's got to be down, the nutrition's got to be down, but does it kind of, are they taking a few grand's worth, a few hundred quid? What would you kind of estimate there?
What price wise again? Um,
Yeah, I know you said around like you get better contacts and stuff, but if you have to give us a rough.
let's think. Well, I mean, like if we talk about like growth hormone, I'll probably might be looking like £400 a month just on growth hormone. Um,
On growth. Okay.
is that right? Maybe less. Yeah, maybe a little, maybe £300 a month. Um, but the actual again, the steroids again, not not super expensive. You might be talking like £100 a month. But yeah, I mean, to
Hmm.
answer your other question that was attached to that, yeah, generally you have to be progressive with your doses. One, as you get bigger, like on a milligram per kilogram basis, just your baseline levels or your baseline needs are going to go up. And there'll be a certain point where a
Hmm.
certain amount supports your current muscle mass. And then to get bigger, you're going to have to progress again. Um, but don't let,
Hmm.
obviously, there's a lot of people that take silly amounts and then think, well, I've got to take more. I'm talking a progressive dose
Yeah.
from an effective dose. So if you
Yeah.
require, let's say, 1,000 milligrams to grow, eventually you're going to get
Hmm.
bigger. So you might need, um, I don't know, you might need 1,200 milligrams to grow. I mean, I generally work
Hmm.
things out on sort of like a milligram per kilogram basis. So obviously, as your kilograms go up, as you get bigger every year, even sort of the same dose is
Yeah.
actually going to be a greater dose as a number. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's kind of the same as calories,
yeah,
isn't it? Your basal metabolic rate and how much you need. Okay. That's cool. And I can remember this was off your story again the other day, and I think it was around. Well, it's going back to what you said at the beginning. You've made a lot of mistakes, and you've trialed stuff, and you found out like what works for you, what doesn't. So I think I'm going to butcher what I think it might have been test 5 grams. You was up to 5 grams of something, and you said, "Yeah, that was just too much. I felt wank
yeah. I
from
mean,
it."
that was back in 2014. Um, I was naive. I was still a baby in the sport, um, and that was sort of passed to me from a coach. But to be honest, it was five different compounds, and just the worst part was just being in pain from injecting. That
Okay.
sitting on like lat pull downs and stuff, and you ass cheek just and then every day, I think every day I was doing something like 5.5 mil of oil, like,
Mm,
and they were swollen, and so I probably didn't even get to a point where those drugs had hit sort of like their peak levels in the body. But one,
mm-hmm.
all my muscles hurt from injecting, and I do believe you get to a point where you get feedback from your body when it's just this is just too fucking much. Like I didn't want to. My appetite was gone. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to go to the gym and train. So it's pretty counterproductive.
Yeah.
And for where I was, that was well above the the dose I needed to make progress.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still would have made a lot. I'd have
Yeah.
made the maximum progress possible, but then all the extras, I just think it's all you're just sort of wasting milligrams because at a certain point, right, the muscle building, the benefits stopped, and then how many milligrams are just detrimental to health and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that wasn't a fun time.
Yeah, mate, I bet. So, what would you, just going back to, I guess, rate of improvement and all that type of thing? And this is definitely going to be a little bit of a it depends question because you've got training, you've got genetic potential, you've got nutrition, all that. So, like, if we think about a natural lifter, let's say 3 years into their kind of hypertrophy journey of putting on muscle, on average, how much would you say is kind of expected or normal? And then if we kind of flip that onto like if you're enhanced, because you mentioned the other day, I can't remember if this was on a story. I've been listening to a few of your podcasts, by the way. So I've been doing a little bit of research. I think you said you'd put on like 10 pounds of muscle in 2 years recently, but then you went through a little bit of a drought beforehand.
Um, so in terms of like what natural, if you've been training, I think if a natural gains a couple of pounds, they've done well. I honestly think like of
Yeah.
actual of muscle. Whereas again, obviously genetics play a part and all that type of stuff. But most most sort of toppish bodybuilders in their younger days, like you're probably expecting like in terms of actual muscle gain between like shows and stuff, £10, maybe £15 to someone who's ridiculously um, genetically gifted. And again, that slow it can slow down. Um, yeah, I mean, I
Hmm.
think the results you're going to get on drugs versus off drugs are just ridiculous. I think
Yeah,
progress in terms of actual muscle building is almost, I don't want to say non-existent, but it's very close to
yeah.
um, in
Hmm.
natural experienced sort of lifters.
Hmm. No, I can. It's one of those I've seen like you see loads of memes and stuff for this, like a natural bodybuilding competition and how different it looks. And sometimes the naturals don't look
Yeah,
like they lift, and that's hard sometimes, to see. And I think that's probably the extremes of the sport, where people are like cherry picking. But that's the thing, like with bodybuilding, people want to see the biggest and the leanest and the most like it's that, isn't it? And it's the same with all sports, to be honest with you. Nobody really wants to go watch a rugby game where people can't
yeah,
throw, or an MMA fight where people just don't know what they're doing. It's we want to see the
yeah. If
biggest and the
you go watch the
best.
Olympics, you want to see world records being broken. No one wants to see times. Oh well, so and so ran a
Mm,
second faster 10 years ago. People want to. I
yeah,
mean, we've just we're
yeah,
in the middle of the World Championships now, the athletics. People want to see world
hmm,
records. They do. Um, that's what
hmm,
makes that sport money. The people that run the sport need world records to keep them relevant. They need golden boys. They need Usain Bolts. They need people to sort of
yeah,
shine a light on their sport. If everyone was just being rubbish, oh, it's not like people want to go and watch
hmm,
Formula One, don't they? They don't want to go and watch like Nissan Micras race each other. It's, so
yeah,
people don't want to believe that there's drugs in sport, and the people that take the drugs and whatever try not to let on that there's drugs in. But yeah, that's the entertainment value is people doing things better and better all the time. We want to see faster. We want to see
hmm,
bigger. It's it's just how we are as I think as a species. Like and then you find out that someone that gave you what you wanted, oh, they cheated. It's like, well, is it cheating? Like they're
yeah.
all
Of
doing
course,
it. Like it's still a
yeah,
level playing field, just not the
yeah.
level playing field that
That's
you
the
think
thing.
it is.
That's a good point. That and with I don't know if you ever watch any like CrossFit or anything, but I think they've had like two people get caught, and I'm going to say that with quotes actually. And there was a few conspiracies around it where people like we know that there is drugs in the sport, and the organization itself have almost like highlighted a few people as scapegoats just to say that they are testing and they are being really proactive with that, almost to protect the Rich Fronins and the Frasers and all this type of thing. What's your thoughts there? Are you
Yeah,
just
of
like, yeah,
course.
they're
I
on
mean,
it?
look at the women.
Like,
Like I'm like
yeah, fair.
elite,
Yeah.
elite cross. I mean, amateur CrossFit's rife, but elite CrossFit, they're all on drugs. Like, and the one that isn't is last, if they're
Hmm.
not. So, yeah, anyone that
Yeah.
tries to tell
Yeah.
me that CrossFitters don't take drugs, no. One, you just got to take a look at them, watch
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing, and also I know people that work with them. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
CrossFitters take drugs. And I also believe that the testing is, as
Yeah.
you say, if if they caught everybody, they'd be out of a job. If they didn't catch anyone, they'd also be out of a job.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to sort of do enough to keep the sport moving, but also say, yeah,
Yeah.
we are being diligent. And at the end of the day, they could just literally point at someone in a crowd. If 100% of all the people at CrossFit are taking drugs, they'll go, well, you failed. And they're not going to say I didn't because they know they did.
Yeah.
So they'll just be like, you
Yeah.
failed. And they're like, oh, fuck. They're not going to dispute it because they were on drugs.
Mm.
Um, I don't think,
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's drug tested, not drug free, and that's a difference, because testing itself is not a perfect process, and you can fake. You look at Icarus.
Yeah.
You seen Icarus on Netflix? Yeah, around like how the Russians used to do it, and I thought it'd be something super complicated of how they like mix chemicals and did all this, but now we just drill a hole in the wall and take the drugs. It was like such a funny one for me just to see that, but that was probably the first eye-opening experience that I ever had of well, actually, people specialize in being able to get people past drug tests and all that type of thing. I thought it was
Yeah, I
super
mean,
cool.
I learned something cool the other day, and it was obviously like in the testing that they do like a ratio of testosterone to epitestosterone, and now the human body produces that in a 1-to-1 ratio. Yet testing
Mm,
allows a 3-to-1 ratio. So they're almost saying, yeah, you can just cheat a little bit.
okay.
But in
Yeah.
1986, I think when Ben Johnson got done and like burnt at the stake and fucking torn apart, his ratio it was something like 3.75 or something. And then the following Olympics in 92,
Mm,
they actually changed the rules to allow a 5-to-1 ratio. So Ben Johnson, although cheated and was crucified in 86, was yeah, oh, and then in 90, he would have been totally fine. So
mm,
I, are they really like they're sort of saying, yeah, you can cheat, but just don't make it super obvious? I mean, Lance Armstrong passed like 100 top level drugs tests. The guy never got caught taking drugs. He just admitted it on oath.
mm.
Like,
Yeah, mate, and it's that in itself is such an interesting thing. Obviously, it's like rules are rules, and I think you've got to stick to them to an extent. But also, the people that make the rules are not perfect. And if you look at laws, for example, we've got people still in prison in American states because they got busted with weed, and then it's legal now. So it's like, well, should they be set free because of that, or should
yeah.
they? It's such a society's mad mate. I was on about this the other day with my barber. It was an interesting conversation. We was going everywhere with it, but like it is interesting. I think because there's some combat sports guys, I think they always fall back on the idea of TRT. Like that's their thing. Is like, well, I had low levels of testosterone. I lost a bollock when I was young, or something along those lines, and is such a I don't know enough about it to really have a strong opinion, to be honest with you. But this is why I want podcasts like this actually, because people chatting about it that are actually in that world and understand. Because if you're not a part of it, you're probably really naive to these
Yeah, I mean,
things.
I think you have to. I'm probably even maybe over the top. Like, I just think, yeah, everyone's taking drugs. Like if you're in top level sport, I believe you're using something that is technically banned. Um, I think a lot of
Mm,
MMA guys will pretty much 100% use growth hormone just because of the recovery capabilities, like the soft
mm,
tissue and the orthopedic sort of recovery. Like when you're training that hard, and I think insulin again, multiple bouts of training a day, recoveries between insulin, and these things are not really detectable as such. Like we may like someone's not going to, oh, you've got insulin in your body. It's like, yeah, I had a sandwich. So, and then again, like going back to obviously the testing, I remember reading um, a letter from Victor Conte. I don't know if you have you watched the new documentary on Netflix with him. It's a, it's like
I
an
haven't.
untold
I've got it on the
series,
list.
and yeah, Hall of Shame. I remember reading a letter that Victor Conte wrote to Dwayne Chambers in like the 90s, maybe 2000s. Um, and it basically describes sort of how the testing works, and he worked out that most of the testing was sort of done in season. Like even though you had sort of four
Mm,
quarters, he analyzed all the tests and like most of the testing is done in the third quarter of the year, which is the competition. So it's not really evenly spread. Uh, and basically, it's a three strikes and you're out rule. So you can miss two tests, but if you miss the third, you're done. But with the WAD or whatever it is, you have to always give your location. This is where I'm training. This, if you need to find me to test me, I'm here. But they basically say, right, we just say we're here and we go here
mm,
and we train. We take drugs. We take as much drugs as possible. We
yeah.
take loads of drugs, and then they go, you missed your drugs test, and oh, sorry, shit, right. And then we do the same. They do the same. We do the same. Then when you fail your second drug test, third one you're out. Then you just got to stop taking drugs. But you've had that window of They might have had
Mm.
6, 7 months of just smashing drugs in, and then they have to sort of right, we stop. And drugs in competition isn't necessarily like crazily beneficial. Those, I mean, those physiological gains manifest themselves for life. So if you've managed to use sort of 6, 7, 8 months of the year, you've been able to build more muscle during that year, and then that muscle is now more potential strength, and then you do a strength training block, and bam, bam, bam. Then now you're running faster, and I'm off drugs. Or they'll use much
Yeah.
shorter like they might use like a testosterone suspension or something. This, so the closer they get into a test, they can then control the drugs, so it's out of their system before they're even there. So you've got the problem is drug testing is normally just playing catch up. They're trying to right the guys that are doing it are ahead
Yeah.
of the game. Um, so I think
Hmm.
either you're a moron for being on a drug when your drug test comes around, or they just went you and said, "Oh fuck." Um, but if you do it right, and I think if you plan it properly, and if you've got the mean, like a lot of people, and generally they'll have the top athletes will have like inside knowledge when the drugs test are coming. They'll have people to cover up paperwork, bury paperwork. So you could fail a test and oh, we just lost it again. I mean,
Mm.
like you can never prove anything. Like people like Usain Bolt. If Usain Bolt got stung, the world of athletics would fall apart. So he's never going to get stung. Like, he'd be like, oh well, let's just offer
Yeah.
up another Jamaican. You did. Oh, you failed. Oh, we are testing. So I do believe,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, they do have a scapegoat or something like that, just to say, yeah, we're testing our athletes. This one failed. These are all clean, even though they're not. Because I don't believe that anyone that's
Mm.
winning at the top end of sport um, is not taking drugs.
Well, I guess it goes back to I'm just because I've so I train a few top guys in like different sports, and I think I'm thinking back to some of them that are in more less physically dominant sports, for example, ones that have more of a skill based component where they can be top level, and there's levels to that, but they're part of like the WADA scheme and the whereabouts where you have to document it. And they've told me, I'm not coming into the gym tomorrow because I got woke up at 3 and 5 p.m. because I had to piss in a jar and take blood and all this type of thing. And it is a really interesting one, and I imagine different national governing bodies have different schemes. I actually don't know. This is, very naive to this. We had to do like an anti-doping thing, a UCAD thing for our accreditation. But yeah, that's really interesting. What was that?
Yeah,
Untold and
Hall
the
of Shame, that one.
what was it called?
Um, but you say about
Hall of
like skill
Shame.
acquisition and things like your DHT derivative or your DHT derivatives in terms of anabolic steroids are massively responsible for like neurological performance, neurological gain. So skill acquisition, like if
Mm,
you use something like a Mastron or a Winstrol or Primobolan, your skill acquisition is massively like uplifted. So if you are a jiu-jitsu guy, if
fair.
you're like someone anyone but that's trying to learn like a motor pattern or any skill, those drugs are massive to actual one the neurology of
Mm,
things. So things happen quicker, the signals are sent quicker, faster contractions, but also learning. I believe it's one of the reasons why up until like a certain age, boys and girls are very sort of even, and then as boys hit puberty, they become, and you have girls that are sort of very uncoordinated in their mid-teens because the testosterone that boys get, which is then converted into a DHT, actually increases their capacity for motor learning, coordination, and things like that. I mean, we all talk about, oh, he throws like a girl, blah, 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 because boys have that hormonal component to learning. Uh, And you can get that through steroid.
mm,
This is one of the things that it's not all about muscle building. And there's lots of cognitive like and the stimulants and things like modafinil. I'm sure it's wildly fucking abused um, in people like that. People that
mm,
need big attention spans. They've got to learn. They've got to do things. Nootropics and everything like that. So they will definitely have their they will definitely have their place in those sports. Um,
mm.
but again, it's just obviously how people are getting around it. And I mean, like I say, I'm not I don't believe that every single person's on drugs, but in those top sports, I don't believe there's a sport in the world where a large chunk are not like not taking
It's
drugs. I
untouched.
mean, I think what did I
Yeah.
read the other day?
And
The
what you said there,
the
go on.
in terms of like per capita or whatever, the biggest busts in Olympics is actually archery for performance enhancing drugs. Like it's fucking archery. They're the
Really?
ones that get busted the most. And like as a ratio of
You
people that
have
actually do
that.
archery to the ones that get done for failed drugs tests, it's the greatest one. And it's fucking archery.
That's mad, mate. Well, you know what? When you were speaking about nootropics and stuff, I follow a guy on social media, and he's going through this stage where he's taking shrooms,
Yeah.
essentially. Like that's his thing, and he's speaking through like the benefits that it's given him from like a mental health standpoint. He speaks about that and finding his purpose in life and spirituality and all that. But he's learning baseball. It's like a new sport for him, and he's like he will dose that a certain time period before he goes to practice, and it is like he is just so in tune with his body. And it's like instead of having one breakthrough moment a week of this, learning a baseball swing, he said
Yeah.
I have five a session, and he said I'm just getting better so quick. And I thought that's mad, and he's very of the opinion that that is going to be the next thing, which is, blew my mind because I just don't know about this stuff.
Yeah,
And it's,
I've seen
yeah,
a
it's
lot of
eye
people
opening.
they microdose it for like people that like require like high amounts of productivity in a day. They're doing like crazy shit, just like microdose it. Is it psilocybin? Is that what it's called? I can't pronounce the fucking actual name, but
Yeah,
yeah, like,
yeah.
and there's different. I've seen some guy on Instagram, and they have like different varieties, and like, oh, I'll have one of them, and everyone's got a little different purpose. And again, a bit like drugs. People, I want you to take that drug for that characteristic and that one for that.
Mm.
People are exploring loads of shit, but yeah, I know quite a few people that microdose like mushrooms and get massively like improved
Hmm.
productivity during the day. And then I know people that take shitloads and space out.
One of my That's what I was going to say. I've got a friend who I think he's probably done mushrooms like three times, and he said he bought a certain strand, and it was called Poseidon, so like water. And he said this trip made him think that everything was wet, and he said he felt like he was drooling, so he just kept going. And he's just like, for me, that's such a mad thing that you can get like a flavor
Yeah.
almost that kind of dictates your trip. But yeah, anyway, right. So I've got another one for you. So what's the longevity of something like this then? Because inevitably there's going to come, well, I don't know, there's going to come a point when you can no longer keep taking the same amounts. And like what happens after bodybuilding for you? Do you always keep a certain amount? Do you completely get rid? Like,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
talk to us
as
about
I
that.
alluded to earlier, I believe like the physiology that's like the physiology changes that's brought on by last a lifetime, which is why I find it quite peculiar when
Mm,
someone gets done and they get like a 2 year ban, and yeah, come back, and it's like, well, one, they're already on drugs. Now
yeah.
you're giving them 2 years off where they're not getting tested to take more drugs, and then you're going to let them come back, and oh, they ran faster, but they were clean.
Mm,
Like, well done. Yeah, I actually think they've done quite a lot of studies onto it, and they've pretty much shown that use in your sort of 20s lasts literally until you die. Um, in terms of sort of longevity, I
mm,
mean, it's a weird one because I think the biggest factor, like with bodybuilders anyway, is not necessarily the drug use. It's more like the exaggerated body weights. I think that's what shortens people life, kills your like. When I was natural, played football, high level, blah blah blah, I was 140 pounds. Like I'm 240 pounds at the minute,
mm,
and I've been up to 280 this year.
yeah.
So 100 to 140 pounds above what is probably my natural baseline weight is going to take it's a big stress on the body. Like your organs can only do so much. And I think, um, I believe there's a certain point, probably when you get to about 40, I think you have to start thinking about winding it down in terms of your body weight. Otherwise, you might pay a bigger price.
Hmm.
Like you're probably shaving years off your life anyway, using drugs, being this heavy. I will never dispute that. But I do believe
Hmm.
that if you the guys that sort of can't let go and they need to, if they want to stay hyper muscular in their 40s and 50s, then you are asking for trouble. Um, yes, the drugs will have their own impact, but I actually think body weight itself is the bit like big dogs die faster type thing. Um, so it,
Mm. And it's interesting with that, isn't it? Because I think we go back to our perception of drugs, and I'm thinking, right, if I think about some of the bodybuilders that I know who are older and are absolutely fucked, I instantly think Ronnie Coleman, but it's not necessarily the drugs that got him to that point. It's probably the lifting, and it's probably the abuse of certain things along the line. I
I
don't know
think
what
with
your
Ronnie,
thoughts
like
are
Ronnie's,
with
he's
that.
spinal as opposed to like all these discs and everything like have been fused and were fucked. So I don't think that's necessarily a health implication that's a direct use of drugs. I just think that guy was so genetically and then enhanced, was so strong that the
Mm,
poundages he required to train with just eventually took its toll. Like skeleton can only be so strong.
mm,
And I imagine with his genetics and things like
yeah,
that, that he will have had a more robust frame than your normal guy. Like you look at strongmen, like they're not just big muscles, like they've got crazy tendon strength and things like that. So that is a genetic factor.
thick.
But I just think he's one of those that his issues just come from either anyone. I mean, you can slip a disc at any time, like it's one of those things. And that I think that's all. It was a compressed disc that he sort of ignored and just
Mm,
carried on and carried on, and then ignored medical sort of advice to maybe you should stop, otherwise it's going to cost you your ability to walk. Um, I don't necessarily think with
mm-hmm.
Ronnie it was like his issues. I mean, he may have other health issues that we don't know about. But I do believe like the ones that we sort of
Yeah.
see and know about are not exactly sort of like a drug related issue. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I do. I think that you have to be a little bit sensible.
Yeah, I
Like
think.
if you want to look, I mean, the reason we get sort of smaller and more frail as we get older is because our body hits a certain point. Then you are over the hill. Things start to downregulate. Organs they don't work as well.
Mm,
So nature makes us shrink. Like older people get shorter, we get smaller, we get sort of as a way to prolong life because our body can't. So if you're slamming in loads of drugs to try and maintain this muscle that nature really doesn't want and definitely doesn't want at that point, it's just stress.
mm. Yeah, and it's one of the things I was kind of thinking about, and it's similar with. I was thinking through strength training in general, and I think strength training itself is a really healthy thing, and I think there's an element of it which is really healthy, but you can definitely go over that point and it becomes not strength training use, but strength training abuse. And I imagine it's probably quite similar with drugs as well, and it's hard because it's like, I don't feel like it's one specific point on the scale. I feel like it's a continuum. You mentioned before around you're probably losing a few years off your life from this, but you're probably losing a few years of your life from living near a fucking busy road because of the carbon emissions, and being around people that smoke. It's a really interesting one. Where do you sit with that then? Like the use versus abuse. Like, what
I
is
actually
that
believe
point?
that's more sort of like a philosophical thing, and everybody's answer is going to be quite different. Like one person might say, if you're using a drug for it to not cure the ailment that it's designed for, it's abuse. So somebody else might be like, well,
Mm,
I'm happy taking this amount and I want to do it, and that's what I do. So I don't know if you. I generally believe that like what is abuse? Like if you're
yeah,
that's I
yeah. I
mean
think you'd
I
need
just
like
believe that's
clear
sort of
definitions.
philosophical. Like if I say, well, this is what I want to achieve and this is what I need to do that, well, I'm just using that drug to get to my goal. But that might be abuse to
Hmm.
somebody else. My the way I like if somebody asks
Mm,
me what I think I deem abusive performance enhancing drugs are, I generally say, obviously, we're talking about sports. So if you're somebody that doesn't train to the maximum and you don't look after your nutrition to the maximum, and then you use drugs, in my opinion, that's to me, that's where you start abusing drugs. You're papering over the cracks of the shortcomings in other areas. Uh, but then someone might say, that's what I'm using it for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using drugs because I don't want to train that hard and I don't want to eat that well and I still want results. But to me, my definition, where I like, if I had a client and they came to me and said, I want to use drugs, I'd be like, well, let's get everything else in order first because your diet's shit and you don't train very well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when everything's,
Yeah.
I think drugs are the last thing on the list. But when everything's right, I think drugs are the most powerful on the list. So I did put a Facebook thing a while ago, and I was like, if you're talking about all that muscle
Nice.
building, for me, drugs are the most important, and everyone lost their shit. I think they misunderstood sort of what they were saying. Oh, well, if you get rid of this and get, I was like, I wasn't getting rid of everything, but if everything is maximized, the ones that's going to make the biggest change is the drugs.
Yeah.
But I don't believe you should take drugs until
Mm-hmm.
everything else. You got to get all your ducks in a row before you use that. Like so, like people sort of say, oh, the drugs are
Yeah.
the drugs are the cherry on the cake. I actually don't believe it. I actually think the drugs are the oven that the cake fucking bakes it. But you shouldn't be taking
Yeah.
them
Okay.
if everything else. But this is the thing with elite athletes. You're not going to find an elite athlete that's not doing everything else. So, so yeah,
Mm.
I think it
Yeah.
depends on who you ask that question
Yeah.
to and what their viewpoints are. Like say to me, like someone be like, "Oh, well, I'm just replacing the natural testosterone that I should be producing, therefore I'm using that drug for its intended purpose." But someone might, "Well, I'm just taking twice as much, but I'm just trying to do it just for a little bit of performance in the gym and just to feel a bit more alpha male and blah blah blah." So it's sort of like where do you draw that line? And I guess everyone line's different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I can't put
Yeah.
a clear definition on that.
Mate,
I just sort of have my own philosophical response.
love it. We'll take it. I'll take it as an answer, mate. Right. So I guess I have like one final one for you, mate.
Hmm.
So you've got a kid on the way, right?
4 weeks.
How long?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, mate, it's soon. You
Yeah, I'm looking
excited?
forward.
So with that, then, mate, it'll be sick. It'll be
Yeah.
sick. Like, Cole.
Mhm.
So I train at his gym, Cole Fulton. And with you speaking about you used to play football, he was saying this the other day as well about you. He
Yeah,
said you were
we
sick. He
used
said you
to.
were really, really good.
Yeah, I used to
Um,
love playing with Cole
because
as
you
well.
run.
He's very very good at football. Very good.
Yeah. But yeah, he was basically saying how it's just so cool. I don't know how old his little one is. But yeah, he seems super happy with it. So with this then, I believe, and I might have made this up, so do correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were trying to conceive, did you have to adjust your dosage? I think I might have saw this on
Uh,
your story, or
yes
have I
and
made that
no.
up?
The adjustment in dosage was already sort of planned, periodized thing. So it was that would have happened anyway. But
Okay.
because during that time we also wanted to get pregnant, I introduced some drugs to boost fertility along. So I was on the bridge between two courses. So what sort of known as like sports HRT, which is not true medical like TRT, but like sort of an amount of drugs where you can
Hmm.
not it's not detrimental to health and you can still fix your blood work and all that type of stuff, but at the same time you're still on drugs and you're still getting a little bit of benefit in holding the muscle or as much as possible. Um, so yeah, so I was running that. I think
Hmm.
it was two. I was on 300 milligrams total a week, mixture of testosterone and primobolan, and then we used I used HCG and HMG, which are like fertility drugs type thing. And yeah, we were pregnant 9 weeks later. So fortunately, everything went to plan.
Nice.
Um,
Congrats. Good work. Yeah. Love it. Actually, right, Matt, I've got another question because you mentioned blood work there, actually. And I think that's something really interesting because if I go back to bloody when I was 16 and a few of the lads in the college changing room were talking about taking D-ball, blood work would not have been a thing that they even considered. So talk to me about blood work and the importance of that
Yeah, I mean, it's
for
weird
being
because
on.
like even when I started, no one really spoke about it, and then the industry came a little bit more sort of conscious, shall we say, about a person's health. Um, so I want to say maybe like around sort of like 2013, 14, and it's just sort of got bigger and bigger. Like, I mean, even now, like you see it on, you open a magazine or you go on Instagram, everyone's doing like a men's health wellness check, and blood work has become this big thing, not just in sports, but just in normal people. Um, but yeah, I believe that
Mm,
if you're somebody I mean, if you've never taken drugs before, it may be wise and you're planning on taking them, it may be wise to say, right, I'm going to do some initial blood work to get a baseline of everything. Because there's no point in taking some drugs and then 10 weeks later do your blood work and go, oh God, all of this is out. If it was out beforehand, because there is a big, like, blood work,
mm,
although is very good, it is only a snapshot of when you drew that blood out. It So some people like to read
yeah.
too much into it, and some people are a bit blasé with it. But I think if you sort of just
Mm,
if you do it very regularly, like I try and get mine done like 4 times a year, every like 3 months. Um,
okay.
so you can, and obviously during different points. So you might get your blood work done at the peak of drug use in the off season when body weight's super elevated. Then you might get blood work done in a like in the middle of a bridge when blood work's low. Then maybe in the peak of a prep where blood work's high but body weight's low, and then like vice versa. And then so you can use obviously blood work just to check maybe right how the things look in organ health, stuff like that. But a lot of people, and I imagine people like elite athletes with a lot of money and a lot of resources, will actually use blood work to actually dictate their drug use. They'll take a drug, then right, let's test this, bam, right, then we're going to adjust to this,
Mm,
and every single decision that's made will probably be via they'll have laboratories where they can just test it. I mean, we've got one now in Grimsby where you can walk in, blood's tested, same day results back. You three visited on Hayton Avenue if anyone's listening from
all
Grimsby.
right.
Um, so you can get a very sort of comprehensive
Love
thing.
it.
So you can actually use it as a tool as to um, and a lot of people can sort of run into some speed bumps, like the sex drive thing and things like that, and that can be hormonal. So right, let's before we just back in the day, people got just take this drug, take that drug, and guess. You can actually be a little bit more specific and say, actually, let's check first. Oh, it wasn't that, so let's not take that drug, or it is that. Let's
Mm,
fix it. Um, so yeah, and I do think even beyond that, other testing like I think like echoes and like echocardiograms and things like that, your ECGs, calcium tests, blood work will only give you a little bit of the picture. Um, so I think
mm,
if you want to spend money on drugs, be willing to spend money on blood work. Oh, it's expensive, and it's like, well, you
yeah.
picked your path. Like you don't want to find out there's a problem the hard way.
Yeah.
If I mean, certain things do just happen. Like
Yeah.
blood work can be whatever, but certain things there can be a
Hmm.
pattern, and you can say, right, I've got X amount of issues, and these all need addressing. And it can just be the difference between right, the next course that I do,
Yeah.
this drug really fucks this up. I'm no longer that's off the list. So where we were spoken about feelings and stuff,
Hmm.
the internals we don't have feelings for. But if you can say this drug did this, that's not good. I'll use this one instead. That doesn't do that. So as you sort of get more experience, you can almost map out the drugs that are less egregious to you. Not gonna fuck you. I mean, they all pretty much, in terms of like actual contractile proteins, like your actin, your myosin, every drug pretty much gives you the same amount, like across the dose for dose across the time. obviously you get other things with that. So people are like so hell bent on I want to use that drug, but it's like if that drug doesn't agree with you, and if it absolutely like I've stopped using a lot of DHTs because I think it's partly genetic, but it's obviously like my HDL, like my good cholesterol, takes an absolute smashing if I use a lot of DHT. So I now try and avoid that. Um, and then things like I'll monitor like my hemoglobin and stuff like I give blood quite regularly. Um, it's a little bit better now because I've got myself like an APAP, a CPAP machine, whereas beforehand my red blood cells was always through the roof, and I think a large part of that was sleep apnea. It was almost like I was training at altitude when I was in bed. So my red blood cells were always very high,
Mm,
which from an athletic point of view is brilliant, but from a stroke point of view, it's not that great. So
yeah.
so I had to find sort of that, try and
Not
find that
ideal.
balance of the benefit to sort of the risk. So yeah, blood work can show you quite a lot of stuff, and I do think that
Mm,
I make sure all my clients get blood work because I think it's very. Oh yeah,
yeah. Just make sure you can be informed with that, isn't it? Be more specific, be more individualized, and covers your back, covers their back, because there's risks with everything, but you can definitely mitigate
yeah.
risks by choosing stuff like this. So, mate, that's perfect. Sweet. I we'll wrap it up there, mate. I just want to thank you for your time. That was absolutely sick, really informative. I know people are going to be a little bit blown away actually at how honest you were with stuff like that, and that's super important. It needs to be that way because if you don't know what you're getting yourself into with this type of thing, then you're just going in blind, And if you can avoid, or if you can give somebody the information to avoid making the mistakes you've made, you've won there,
Yeah, you're
haven't
very
you?
welcome.
So
I
yeah,
try
mate,
and
I
be
really
very
appreciate
sort
your
of
time today.
transparent with the drug side of things. Like you say, I believe that I'm not ashamed of my drug use. I don't hide it, but I do believe if I can help someone, like I say, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'll try and help people not make those mistakes. Some people will just still carry on and find out the hard way. And I'm sort of like that. Like if someone tells me not to do something, I'm like, yeah, well, I'll just try and find out for myself. Um, but yeah, I think it's especially in today's
Yeah,
society, obviously elite level bodybuilders with contracts and things. It is difficult. Some of them are like, oh, he's just bullshitting, he's lying. It's sort of like he is, but at the same time for a good reason. Especially with laws in America and things surrounding drugs, people have
yeah.
to be careful what they say. And at the same time, if you take an elite bodybuilder and says, "Yeah, I'm taking 5 gram of gear," some 17-year-old kid's going to say, well, I need to take 5 grams to look like that. And it's like, well, no, it's taken me 20 years to get to looking like this and to needing 5 gram. So I guess there is a responsibility with it. And the problem is
Mm.
things just get cut down to a 25-second reel these days. They'd miss out all the context and just be like, so and so takes this amount of drugs. That's how many drugs I need to take. I think
Oh, mate, I'm gonna crop the shit out of this
5 grams.
podcast. I've got you saying. I've got you. I've got you saying 5 grams is what you need, and beating up your wife. I've got the three. You're done.
Yeah.
But you are right, mate. It's 100% that. Like it's such a difficult thing trying to spread good information. Yeah, and it's never going to be an easy job.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's some very good people out there trying, but people want to just hear the sexy stuff, don't they? They just want to. I mean, it's just again, it's the way of the world. Like we talked about, people want to see the records being broken. People don't want to wear boring shit.
Yeah,
Um, they just want to be told, "Take this, you'll be massive,"
yeah.
and unfortunately, it's just not true.
One of the so in terms of sources of information, then this is probably a good point to finish on. Good sources of information if people are like actually considering it or are just curious about that side of things. Evil GSP is that's like a good source.
Yeah, in my opinion, Broderick Chavez is the man to go to learn about the information. He deals with Olympic athletes, martial. So he's bodybuilding is not his thing as so he deals with bodybuilders. He deals with strongmen, and him himself was a bodybuilder and then an elite powerlifter.
Hmm.
But he worked very much with probably a secret list of athletes that. So if he ever heard me say this, he'd probably kill me. But he's sort of like my mentor in terms of the PD side of things. He's someone I very much look up to. I will try and absorb as much information from him as possible. And that's who I go to for my sort of knowledge and like that. So yeah, he has a website which is members.teamevilgsp. And I think it's $20 a month.
Mm.
Um, and there's so much material on there, and it's just he does like 2 hours of Q&As a week. So you can literally sit on a Facebook Live in his private group, just ask questions. You'll get the answers as a Facebook group, and then there's already lots of all these Q&As get put on there as well. So there's like thousands of hours going back like 3 or 4 years of every single one, and then loads of other materials. He's got a team around him of other experts that deal with combat sports and this and that. So I believe, especially sort of the people that you'll work with, um, that's where I would recommend they go to learn about that stuff.
Awesome.
Because yeah, his knowledge is ridiculous.
Sick. Love it. I'll stick all that information in the show notes below, mate. I'll put all your stuff in there as well. And I'll put the Team Evil GSP stuff. But yeah, once again, mate, thank you very much and enjoy your chest and calf session.
Yeah, thank you very much, mate. It's been a pleasure.